I am in recovery. That's right, making the announcement here.
Good for you.
In recovery. I've spent the last 4.5 days drinking beer and watching basketball.
Oh. That kind of recovery.
Yeah, it's literally going to recover until we record the show when we're drinking this week's beer. That's about how long the recovery process is going to last for me, because I've been consumed by the madness that is March.
Yeah.
Which let's make sure that we note here that March Madness is second only to Macho Madness.
I don't know. It might be.
It's Macho Madness is definitely second to March Madness.
Yeah, I would say so. Well, at least in the month of March.
So I was so looking forward to episode 3 of the Case Against Adnan Syed last night. However, still going through the madness, I was a little consumed by the tornado of March Madness, caught up in it, and I had to push back and watch.
So you had one job and you didn't do the job.
The Buckeye basketball game came on at like 9, and that's what time the Syed show was coming on. So
right.
I watched the basketball game, and then
but nobody's paying you to talk about that game.
And I watched. Well, there's some debate if anybody's paying me to talk about off the record stuff too.
I don't think you're getting paid for that either.
So
it's in your contract.
No, I set myself up good. I was like, cool. Right after the Buckeye game, which they lost, and I thought I will plop down on the couch and tune into episode 3 there. However, I didn't make it through the episode.
Right.
But I am extremely responsible, extremely dedicated to the garage. Woke up an hour and 15 minutes early today so that I could watch it again.
Right. And start drinking again.
No, recovery.
Well, that's part of the recovery. I poured a little whiskey in my coffee this morning.
Poured a little coffee in my whiskey this morning.
No, it's definitely more coffee than whiskey. No, my buddy Morgan came over. We've done this for the last 2 episodes because we both got sucked back into the case. Hardcore.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And so
I think there's millions out there that have.
Yeah, and so his whole thing was, hey, let's get together and actually watch the episode together, and then we'll kind of bullshit. And so we did that last week, and it was a lot of fun, so he came back over this week. But the problem is he lays on my couch like he's Titanic.
Like
when he wants her to lay down.
Like Janet Jackson on the velvet rope.
Yeah. It's like
album cover. I think maybe she's not on the couch there, but
he takes all my pillows and messes with them, and I have a nice blanket that he always messes up.
Mm-hmm.
And then he doesn't fix it. It's not like he gets up and fixes it. He just walks out of the room.
Right.
Like a complete diva. And but it's fun. It's been a lot of fun to have him come over and shoot the shit about the episodes. And I also think we've been doing a lot of stuff where we pause it. If we think that's
fun.
Something, we pause it. We kind of talk about it. Maybe rewind it to double check what they said.
Mm-hmm.
And it's definitely been pretty interesting. And he started. I'm trying to find it now. I'm on our Twitter account because that's all it's on is the Twitter account.
Well, while you're looking for that,
well, hold on. One. This is hilarious. They started a petition on Twitter, This American Life petition to get it so I can do a song for them.
Oh yeah, that's your dream.
So people have been signing up, which is funny because I'm like, wait, you're just signing me up for more work.
Mm-hmm.
But thank you. And then, so Morgan started this thing. He called me and said, "Hey, I want to do this thing," and it's called Discord, 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 and you can join. It's basically multiple True Crime Garage discussions.
Okay.
So it's an app. So you download the app and you can actually leave text messages or audio messages, which I think sometimes we're going to pull those audio messages and we'll play them on off the record.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can do live chats. So we did a live chat before we watched the show, just a little bit, and we just did it through the live chat, but just text. And I think this Wednesday at like 6 o'clock or something, we're going to do a hour-long live chat, something like that. And we'll actually, it'll just be me and Morgan. It'll be him in his garage and me in my garage.
Wow, so you will not have to prepare your couch for...
I can't handle him being on my couch that much and messing it up. I work too goddamn hard for him to mess up my goddamn couch. No, so yeah, Discord is pretty cool. We just joined about a week ago or so.
Oh, cool. So, awesome.
Yeah, it's cool, though, because you state what conversations you're having, so you can, every week, people can go on there. And it's not just about discussing stuff with us. They can discuss stuff, with between themselves about the cases, the case from last week, or there's a whole discussion board of just off the record. And then there's also a spot where you can leave case suggestions. So
gotcha.
Pretty neat. But it's cool because you can actually just leave a voicemail and not just have to type it all out. So check that out. All right. Was there anything on this episode, part 3? I can't remember what the title was.
Ooh.
Something about justice is arbitrary.
There you go.
Was that it?
I think so.
Justice is arbitrary or something like that.
Well, you know what was interesting for me right away, and this has been the case too with the first episode and second episode, is that, I listened to Serial so long ago and we've covered so many cases since when I listened. I mean, I listened to the Serial well before True Crime Garage even started.
Right.
And I remember enjoying it so much that I think that very shortly after I finished Serial, I went back and listened to it a second time. So where I would think that at that time I felt pretty knowledgeable about the case, or at least Serial's presentation of the case, now it's been so many years removed from it that when I watch some of this, to be completely frank here, I was worried that it was going to be a little boring, because sometimes like Netflix or Prime or HBO or somebody will come out with something that's a case that you or I or both of us know very well.
Right.
And it's kind of an older story, and they're just now getting around to doing a documentary about it. And a lot of times I find that just kind of bores me, because it's like there's not much in the way of new information.
Right.
Regarding this, though, it's like I forgot enough that it's like, oh yeah, you know what I mean? Like, right, I'm watching them, like
information.
Right. I'm like, oh yeah, that this was going on, and oh yeah, they hinted about this a little bit, but they go into it a little bit more. I will say this, like I said, I kind of was a little. I went into it with low expectations because I thought that I might find it to be boring, but it's been very good, and I think that each episode just keeps getting a little better for me. But I don't know if that's just because I'm getting sucked back into the case itself.
Right, but is there anything that jumped out to you as far as the evidence goes, or anything that was presented?
Well, a lot of this episode discussed the cell phone pings and some of the phone calls and their relationship to the timeline and to Jay's story. And that was, I mean, that seems to me like most of this episode 3. And I found that fascinating once again, and I kind of forgot that portion of the case from listening to it a long time.
Yeah, there's been a lot of people that have been either on Twitter, or I've seen some stuff on Facebook that say that once you watch, now I'm going to correct myself. Once you watch episode 3, there's been a lot of, if you watch episode 3, that will change the way that you look at this case forever. I've seen that posted by multiple people. And this is before episode 3 came out. So I don't know if they were given the material early. Sometimes when there's a documentary series, they'll contact us and say, do you want all 6 episodes? We'll send them to you. So I don't know if that's the case here, but I've also seen that the bombshell doesn't happen in episode 3, that it's actually episode 4. And I've seen almost as identical posts that say, once you see episode 4, you'll never look at this case again. Well, I think and Matt saw and Morgan saw the same thing. So while we're watching it, we're like, is the bombshell going to happen in this episode, or is it going to happen in the next episode? Well, I don't obviously know what the next episode is, but I think the bombshell started happening here.
Okay.
I mean, we have multiple situations where Robbie is giving all this information to a very sophisticated, very intelligent lawyer that goes through the whole timeline. Well, you can see that, why was Jay interviewed multiple times? If they got the story correct the first time, they wouldn't call him back in for an interview. But the problem is the cops didn't have their data right, or they would write something down wrong. So then when Jay is saying, well, I was here during that time that I made this call, that because they wrote stuff down wrong, that basically blew their whole case. So then they had to go back and interview him again for the second time. Okay, now we have the corrections. Now we're going to get you to correct this stuff. Oh, okay, we messed up again. Now we got to go back and we got to correct the story. So you want to know if he's lying. He's definitely lying. Why is he lying? That's been the question, I think, from the time Serial came out. Well, he's lying because the cops need his story to make sense with their data. And that's proven, I believe, no doubt in my mind, it's proven in this docuseries. So you have that happening. Then you also have that there's multiple cases where these detectives were threatening witnesses to testify to basically throw somebody under the bus. And the idea that possibly Stephanie and Jay got busted with something. That's the rumor I've been hearing lately. It's not just Jay, but something involving Stephanie as well. That's his girlfriend at the time. That they got caught with drugs or something.
Not his friend Jen, but his girlfriend Stephanie. Okay.
Yeah. And that, and again, that could be a possibility too. Was Jen, I actually believe Jen, but we'll get back to Jen in a second. So the idea is that Jay, Stephanie, maybe it's just Jay, they find some drugs on him. He decides, well, I'll give you a bigger story. If I give you this story about Adnan killing Hay, then you're going to let me go with this stuff. Now, what he admits to could get him some time that he'd have to serve. So it's crazy to me that you have Adnan that is sentenced, a 17-year-old at the time of the crime, is sentenced to life plus 30. And a guy that helped him move the body and bury the body, that's 19 at the time of the crime, gets nothing, gets time served.
Well, and if you believe his story, or at least parts of Jay's story, not only did he help dispose of the murder victim, but he also says that he knew that this may happen before it happened, the murder.
Right. And on top of that, then he also moved evidence. He moved the car.
Right.
Helped move the car. And so then the question becomes, well, how did Jay know where Heyman Lee's car was? Well, if the cops are telling you where you were at when you made certain calls, and that's factually incorrect, then it's not that far of a leap to assume that the cops knew where the car was and they got Jay to tell him where the car was. It's not that far of a leap. So there's multiple.
But just so we're clear, and for my own sake, the vehicle was not removed from that spot until after Jay tells them where it is.
Right. Yeah.
Regardless of how he knows the information, the vehicle sat there until after they claim they get the information from Jay.
Yeah, and there's some evidence as far as the license plate being run. And then the question becomes, was the license plate run by the police officers because they're just looking for the missing car?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they ran the plates, or did they actually run the plates and that's how they found the car? So there's some speculation there.
And Jay says, or according to his statement.
I'm going to get heated by the end of this conversation, for sure, 100%.
So according to his statement, he says that they moved Heyman Lee's vehicle relatively quickly after the murder, after the body disposal.
Right.
Right. And so it would have sat there for close to 6 weeks. Something around that time frame.
Yeah.
What I did really like I think it was in episode 2, not in episode 3, but I did really like when those guys interviewed, it was a lady that had lived in the neighborhood for a very long time. I think she said she moved in there like in the 80s or the 70s.
Right.
And she was saying, they asked her something to the effect of, would it be uncommon for vehicles to sit in this area for an extended period of time? And I think she asked them to like clarify, what do you mean extended period of time? Like a week or 2 weeks? And they were like, no, like we're talking like 4 to 6 weeks, and without you noticing it. And she says emphatically, no, that wouldn't have happened. I would have called me or this other lady who kind of, I love when you get a lady or two, or you get an old timer, or if it's my neighborhood, it's me, like you get the person that kind of elects themselves to be the sheriff of that little neighborhood. And I love that she's like, no, me and this other woman, and I don't recall either of their names.
Right.
Me and this other woman, we would have talked about that. We would have spoke about that. One of us would have called so-and-so, some authority to come out and look at the car.
Which gives you reason to believe that it wasn't there for 6 weeks.
Right.
And so if it wasn't there, hold on, but if it wasn't there for 6 weeks and it was moved, then we have no evidence, then Jay's story is bullshit about the car in general.
Jay could still have very good knowledge about the vehicle, but that's not the story he told to police, or that police and Jay agreed on.
Right. But I think before, you have to figure out, why would Jay lie? Okay, we have these detectives that are notoriously known for, trying to pin something on somebody and then getting them to confess to something. Mm-hmm. You have a 19-year-old that is not lawyering up. He had every right to, never did, probably because he didn't think he could afford it. They were able to manipulate that situation. You have documented proof that his story is inconsistent, and they're getting him to change his story because it didn't line up. And look, they basically get him to say that he's in a certain location at the time. And why are you there? And he's like, well, I'm not really for sure why I was there, but I know I was there because that's what your call log says. Well, when you wrote down the call log wrong, then you got him to tell you the wrong part of town. And so then once you realize, oh shit, that part's wrong, because they went back, with a fine-tooth comb, and they're like, wait a second, that part of the story is wrong because we wrote down the wrong location. Oh, we need to fix that. And then we got to call Jay back in. And then anytime he, there's these little knocks on the desk and stuff that people talked about before. And I guess a lot of this information, as far as the timeline goes, and Jay's motivation for lying. I mean, we know he's a liar in general, but you can lie about everything but be telling the truth about one thing. We kind of talked about that last week.
Yeah.
But in this situation, I don't even know if you'd call him a liar. We have the cops. Look, this to me it's fucking disgusting. Your job is, their job is to serve and protect the community. Their job is not to create fictitious bullshit stories. And when you have him confess, and then you go back through this data, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if they would have actually understood the data themselves at the time, they wouldn't have tried to make it fit their narrative. But they thought that this cell phone records and these cell phone pings, this is science. And people can't dispute science.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when the cover sheet states that any incoming, the only calls that would be, the only calls that are reliable, I believe, come from incoming calls, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it the other way around, outgoing calls?
I thought it was now here's where I'm getting confused. I thought it was outgoing, and the reason why I say that is because I thought it had something to do with the billing, where if they want to track your phone, let's say, to be out of its area, so they can charge you more. But I guess that would work for incoming as well. So pardon the confusion here for those listening. There's probably somebody screaming at their phone right now.
Yeah, go ahead and message Morgan just to see if he can
see what he recalls.
Yeah, which calls aren't reliable. But either way, there's a cover sheet that, they claim through the documentary that it was lost or whatever. I don't know if it was lost or
the person didn't read it.
Or if this lawyer just didn't read it. But right away, their argument, this testimony, the incoming calls are not reliable. It's the outgoing calls that are reliable.
Okay.
Because you're the one making the call.
Right. And they want to know if you're, quote unquote, out of your area. Like it's for billing purposes.
Right. But now they also prove that this was never. So now you have Jay's story, and they go through Jay's story and his confession with a map, and they show you all the pings, and they show you how it lines up in trial. And then they put an expert on the stand that says, yep, that's how this technology works. Well, he didn't know that the incoming calls weren't reliable.
Mm-hmm.
And he claims that if he signed an affidavit that said, if I would have known this information, I would not have testified. And then goes to the family of Adnan and says, sorry, it's my fault. Your son's in jail.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not arguing guilt or innocence here. I'm just saying, factually, we know that the cops fabricated a story. We know that Jay lied and went along with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, we have their expert witness saying, yeah, that's bullshit. So those are big. On top of that, before all this happens, you got the birthday wrong.
Mm-hmm.
He was born in 81. I was 81 as well. They put 80. That means they can hold him without bail.
Mm-hmm.
And they did so. And they did so on a typo. Now, again, I'm not so upset about the typo. I'm upset that there's a ruling made because of a typo. This is not, this is not getting your license renewed. This is not getting some permit to have a fire in your backyard. This is not some building inspection.
Right.
This is somebody's life on the line. And on top of that, you have a murdered victim, and their justice for them is on the line. And you fuck up on every fucking corner. It's appalling. This is how is this a justice system at all? You can't even get the guy's birth date right. And so, and the malicious lying, like, well, we think it's a flight risk because there's numerous of these cases going on where somebody that's Muslim is helped by the Muslim community to basically abandon ship, and they ship them over to Pakistan.
Mm-hmm.
You have prosecutors that their job is not to say bullshit. Their job is to argue with truth. And if that was true, that we had hundreds and hundreds of Muslims that had relationship issues that were killing their exes or their spouses or whatever, and they weren't going on trial because their community surrounded them and protected them and fled them out of the country. If we had hundreds of these cases, then you're arguing the truth. And yes, I don't care if he's 17 or not, he doesn't get bail because he might bail the country. But that's not true. It happened once. But it's the fact that the cops maliciously would tell stories. The cops would maliciously tell lies. And the prosecutors would do so. It's like, how are you supposed to fight a fair fight when they're not fighting fair? I mean, it's absolutely appalling.
Well, and I think it's a little unfair too. I get that they're, bring up his family's background. I get it. But it seems slightly unfair that they're, they do point out, hey, this guy, Adnan, he's an American citizen. It's not like he was born in another country and moved here.
Yeah, we have a guy that does not have a rap sheet. He doesn't have a criminal record.
Right.
We have a kid, mind you, a kid. I'd even say if he's 18, yes, he's technically an adult. Yes, he can vote. He can buy cigarettes. Can't buy booze, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's just not an adult, even at 18. But at 17, definitely not an adult.
Right.
And you can try him as an adult, and I understand that that's how this system works, and you can do that. But this, no criminal past. And on top of that, we have tons of people coming forward as a character witness to say this is a good guy. And not just the Muslim community. We're talking about students he went to school with.
Right.
That could have been prejudiced against him for his religion because he was pretty religious, right? At least wore that on his sleeve enough. Wore it on his sleeve enough where you could be prejudiced against him if that's what kind of person you were. Mm-hmm. And you have several classmates coming forward, and he's a part of this honor program. Elite academics.
Right.
The sports, every time they talk about this former football player, I'm like, God, I would have loved to play against Adnan in high school. I would have smashed him. This is not some super athletic looking dude. You know what I mean? That's what cracks me up every time they have you noticed that they keep mentioning that, like former football athlete.
I mean, that's the picture they have. That's the news clip
right. But it's like that's a lot different than hearing like former honor student. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. A little different. But every time they say former football star and they show his picture and he has these little tiny chicken arms, I'm like, what position did he play? But yeah, it's just so frustrating when you see that. And yes, the system gives you the right to defend yourself and to find these inaccuracies. And what has happened is, in this case, is I think they found a pathway to victory and a pathway to indict somebody on these crimes and to get this off their board. And they went with Jay and they fabricated the truth and they went after it. And I think they just thought it would be swept under the rug. They got the win. He's sentenced to life plus 30. And we got him. Case closed. We didn't have to look into anybody else. We didn't have to look into any other options. And that's it.
But there's also a chance that they believe that they were convicting the right guy. There's also that chance as well. And
yeah, but the guy said it best. The guy that actually worked, the one detective that worked the missing person case, actually worked Heyman Lee's case and then got on board when they were going after Jay to get in confession. He said, he's not an informant, he's a witness. Mm-hmm. And that's what you have in a murder case. And it's like, no. When you are changing the narrative and he's following along, that's informative. That's not a witness. A witness tells you what they saw, their truth, and that's it. But you are taking this data from these cell phone pings and changing this person's story. So the cell phone technology itself would have altered the case. And again, they show you he's awarded a new trial. So basically, he goes from convicted killer to now he's just in jail and he's not convicted of the crime. But what we do know now is that they claim that he's not going to get a new trial and his conviction is going to stand, which I don't understand. I mean, you see that at the end where the lawyer says, well, now we got to fight to keep this ruling upheld. The fact that it's overturned it's sickening, because you don't have to be a smart man or woman to sit down and look at these cell phone records, listen to that story and see how that's changed, and to go, they fabricated the story. And on top of that, we have all these other calls that they're claiming Jay was certain places or Adnan was certain places. And this is what convicts a 17-year-old, and that information was not accurate. The fact, you can't 100% for certain say that Adnan and Jay were in Lincoln Park that night based off the call log anymore.
Right.
You can't, because the information is in front of you. Like, you could assume, I mean, that's kind of what me and Morgan talked about was, okay, maybe it's not reliable. That doesn't mean that it's not accurate.
It doesn't mean that they weren't there. It doesn't mean that they weren't in the park at that time. It just means that you can't point to this piece of information and say that proves that they were there.
Yeah. So, okay.
The other thing, though, just to play, both sides of the courtroom here.
Well, I'm going to go to the other side too in a second. Okay.
The other thing, though, too, and it does appear that the way that they got Jay's story to change to what they wanted, it appears to me that they are trying to make their story fit, or his story fit, the evidence that they believe they have. But to argue the other side of that, Jay will not be the first nor the last person to be suspected of either murder or assisting in some form or fashion of a murder, to lie to police the first time they talk, or the second time, or the third time, or the fourth time.
Yeah.
I'm not coming to any. I don't want to sound like I'm coming to anyone's defense there, but I do think that that's something that should be thought of, or at least taken into factor at some point.
Yes.
Factor that in.
We know Jay's a liar. Okay. We know that. We know he's not a good dude. We know that.
Well, when it comes to telling the truth,
but what I'm saying is that's fine, and I understand that the idea that the first confession might not be the full truth, that you might get more truth as the story comes out. Okay, I think you got that when he's basically like, yeah, I didn't help him, and then it turns into, I helped bury the body. I think that's where you get. Mm-hmm. But what you don't get is a cop writing down that Jay or Adnan's phone would have been in this location at the time, and they wrote it down wrong. And so one of his confessions, he says, where are you at this time when this call comes in? He goes, well, I must have been so-and-so place, right? Mm-hmm. And they're like, yeah, that's right, because that's what the call log says. Mm-hmm. But because they wrote it down wrong, now we got to go back and make him change it. Mm-hmm. And we make sure we got to write it down correctly. And that's my disappointment. It's like, and that the cops didn't look more into the idea that certain calls aren't reliable. So if they're not reliable, let's just not assume anything. Because when you're talking about reasonable doubt, if something, the idea, we have these calls that put Jay and Adnan in Lincoln Park, right? Mm-hmm. But we know from the service provider that those cell phone pings aren't reliable.
Right.
So as a jury, what you'd be instructed to is if there's a point of evidence that could point to guilty or innocence, it is your job to have that lean on the side of innocence. Right? Mm-hmm. That is your job. That's the whole innocent until proven guilty. That's reasonable doubt. So you can't then go into the jury room and go,
But it's also being presented to the jury in a form that this is science. This is what we're showing you today is science.
Right. So whether that cover letter is wrong or it wasn't shared with people, it should have been argued by the defense. And on top of that, the expert should have said, that's not reliable. We can't go off that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was never presented to the jury.
Mm-hmm.
So again, then you get a guy, again, guilty or innocent. You have a guy that they made up stories, and now he has serving a life plus 30. So I said I want to go on the other side for a second.
And so in short, it turns out the expert was not an expert.
Right, and he then signs an affidavit saying I would
right.
never
That individual didn't have an understanding
right.
of how that science, air quotes, worked.
Right, because all he was looking at is that all the incoming calls and outgoing calls, they're all reliable. And then you read the data. So that's what he did.
Mm-hmm.
But then once you just throw in that wrench that, hey, these calls aren't reliable, incoming calls aren't reliable, then you have to throw out any incoming call. And so what they did was, I can't remember the girl's name. It's not Jen, but the girl's house that they claim that they were at. And then they show her, well, you were in school, on Wednesday nights. And so it couldn't happen on that day because the class, the girl even said, I could have skipped class. I could have, not paid attention.
Right.
And what they were showing to her was it was a class that was only like, you could take some of these college classes where it's only like 6 classes, but they're 3 hours each class or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a way to like kind of fast track a class.
Right.
And it was one of those types of classes. So it would have been a class like you miss once, you fail the class.
Yes.
Yeah. So
it's going to be very difficult because you've missed a large portion of the curriculum.
Right. So they were saying, look, that these events that you're remembering couldn't have happened at these times. But again, what were they trying to line up? The cops. Incoming calls.
Mm-hmm.
They were saying, well, we know that you were here, and we know that Jay was there, and we know Adnan was high as a motherfucker at your house. And they got some incoming calls, and then the cops saying, yeah, I remember talking to Adnan. And then he got all nervous, and this girl saying Adnan was high, and he was all nervous because he had to talk to the cops.
Right.
Now, again, did that happen on the 13th when Hay went missing? Doesn't look like it did because she would have been at school. But again, they're trying to line up these incoming calls that might not be reliable. So if they're not reliable, that doesn't even put them in the area. But because it was in her area, they had to get an eyewitness that said, yeah, I hung out with them.
Right.
So I think she doesn't even know. And I feel really bad for these people that get involved because, first of all, it's weeks of her going missing, and then it's trying to backtrack.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really confusing for a lot of people, like in this case. Not people looking on the outside of the case, but people actually on the inside. Because let me just play a little devil's advocate, right? I'll just go into the Adnan's guilty camp for a second.
Well, before you get to that, I mean, that's what Sarah Koenig did so well. I believe it was the very first episode of Serial where she's pointing out how difficult it is for most people to remember certain events within the last week, 10 days, 3 weeks, 6 weeks.
And I love how people are like, well, Adnan doesn't remember everything, so therefore he's guilty.
Well, right. Their belief, if you go under that thought, it's he's conveniently not remembering because he has something to hide.
Right. Yeah. And so the Asia situation.
Mm-hmm.
And they were talking, again, we have another prosecutor that lies saying that she recanted her statements and said that she was forced to make these statements from Adnan's family.
What was her response to that?
She was like, that's bullshit. And she actually wrote another affidavit saying
the same thing she stated originally.
Right, said
that I believe I saw him that day in the library after school.
Right. And again, the thing that becomes strange is when the cops go, well, we think that she was killed during this time period. I don't think she was killed during that time period, personally. I don't think it was like such a small window. But that's the time that the cops came up with. So, well, now you have this girl saying, well, I saw you in the library. Well, if she saw him at the library about 2:15 to 2:30, there's your alibi. He's not killing her at 2:36 in the Best Buy parking lot.
Or making the come get me phone call at 2:36.
Right.
So the key to their story and the key to Adnan's alibi really revolves around that call to come get me at 2:36. So if there was a way, or if Adnan could prove that he was not in the parking lot of Best Buy calling Jay at 2:36, or not in that area, not in the parking lot of Best Buy for 15, 20 minutes before that, then he has to be innocent according to the detective's narrative, the prosecution's narrative, that she was killed and he was picked up around that time. Here's one thing I've always wondered about and I know that it's tough to lay out the timeline of the movements of Adnan that day because he doesn't recall. The thing is, too, when we say don't recall, some of it may be as simple as it was a pretty regular day for this guy, and it's kind of meshing and gelling and getting all mashed up with other regular days. Yeah. And the thing that I've wondered, though, is there a way? Do we know for certain? Again, forgive me, I haven't listened to Serial in years. I mean, I listened to it when it first came out. And what do we know regarding Heyman Lee's timeline? Is there any chance that she could have left school earlier than what everyone is saying?
Well,
because if she did, that throws a big wrench into the whole timeline.
I think that's a possibility.
Because under that scenario, Jay could have killed her when he's out riding around was it Jay's car or Adnan's car?
It was Adnan's car.
So Adnan's car with Adnan's phone.
Yep.
He could have.
And so the motive for Jay, people think that there was rumors that Jay was cheating on his girlfriend Stephanie, and that Hay actually knew, and that Heyman Lee was actually going to tell Stephanie.
Have threatened to out him.
Right, and that would be his motive to kill her. I don't know how much I believe that, because I think this is strangulation. This is personal. I think, to me, it comes down to Adnan. He was the ex-boyfriend. We see that all the time. The current boyfriend, Don, or like I like to call Donnie.
Well,
and then we have Jay. These are because he is confessing to the crime and a possible motive. So those are the three that we kind of know of through the story. But is there some random? Very possible. It's very possible.
So I thought with episode 3, and it's not that I read this anywhere or anything like that. This is really just my own speculation going into it. And I did too, what you and Morgan were talking about there being a bombshell or something really big, significant that they would present to us. I did read an article as well, maybe 2 articles that said something similar, that is going to occur in episode 4.
Right, so that was confusing because a lot of people the stuff that I was kind of blown away by, a lot of people were saying that was on Undisclosed, the podcast, which I just never had the time to get into. The
thing that gets tricky about that is the articles that I remember reading about it, they're discussing this big batch of interesting information that's going to come out in episode 4, but all those articles came out and I read them a day or 2 before watching episode 3. So, if you're not paying attention to the number, you kind of just assume, ooh, that's going to be on the next one.
Right.
But regarding what you were getting into there a little bit is I kind of anticipated that we were going to get more into the Dawn stuff on episode 3, but that didn't happen, right? Like,
no.
Did I miss something? Am I hard of watching?
Yeah, they didn't talk about Don at all. And
I don't even remember his name being mentioned in episode 3.
Right, he's been, not brought up at a lot. He hasn't been brought up a lot, but that makes me wonder, with these private investigators looking into the case, with these other lawyers looking into the case, is there something that they know?
Or is that what we're going to get in episode 4?
Possibly. It's possibly what we'll get in 4. Or did they check out this alibi that never made sense, and did they find out that it's truthful, and then they have to back off of this idea? I mean, because to me, it's about finding the truth. So you take Asia's claim, and again, here's a high school student. She claims that she knows she stayed at her boyfriend's house that night because there was a snowstorm and they didn't have school the next couple of days. That's the big wrench in this whole thing, is that the girl goes missing, and then they have snowstorms. So there is a gap before they even get back to school to start going, she's missing. Her friends talking about her missing. That's really, like, if that doesn't happen, we're going to know some shit. We'd know way more shit, because people would be going, she's missing? Oh, she's not at school today? What the flying fuck? You know what I mean?
Well,
and then people are going to start talking, and then people are going to start hearing stories, and we'd get way more out of the people. But because there was multiple snowstorms, and then the power's going out, and all this shit's happening, and they're missing school, and so you keep having these lapses of time. And I think because of those lapses of time of friends not seeing each other, it disrupts the conversation of where could she be, and if something bad happened to her, who could have done this?
right.
So it's like this perfect storm. So, but like I said, let me play a little devil's advocate here. Let's say that Asia, I mean, how do we know she's telling the truth?
Well, let me say this real quick.
Okay.
Sorry. But we have said this on the show several times. I've said it in regards to eyewitness statements and accounts of past events, that the one thing that I do like about Asia's story is there are some very specific points to her story. It's not just, I think I saw Adnan after school somewhere. No, it's, I saw him in the library, and it would have been between this time and this time. And when I saw him, we spoke about his relationship with Hay and how it was over, and he just wants her to be happy. And I know that I didn't get picked up until this time because I was angry at my boyfriend because he was late. And then the next day we had a snow day.
Right.
It's very detailed. It's a very detailed account.
Right, but this wasn't written a couple days after Hay went missing.
No, I know.
This is after Adnan is arrested.
Right, and that's why I think some people don't believe it.
Right, so let's just go on the side that he's guilty. Okay, so I can dismiss that, right?
Oh, he is? I knew he did it.
Well, I'm just saying I can argue that away.
Okay.
She's misremembering.
Right.
Okay.
Or making it up.
Right, and now not Jen, but the other friend, I can't remember her name, but the one that they went to the house that night.
Right.
And they talked. Well, she's misremembering too. Right? We have evidence of that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that would go in my favor of him being guilty, right? But
or at least not having an alibi.
No, I'm talking about the call that they get from the police officers where they're over at some girl's house that Jay knows that Adnan doesn't know, and he's super high.
Right. What
I'm saying is their defense last night and in episode 3 kind of proved that probably didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't go good for my he's guilty case. Right? Now, Jay, what did they prove last night? Jay lies. But on top of that the cops lied and created a narrative. They proved that last night.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't go good if I believe Adnan's guilty, right?
Right.
But the thing that happens at the end of the episode is what I find very interesting.
Okay.
And I believe somebody was arguing with me on Twitter, and they were saying Rabia is one of the executive producers. That might be true. I don't know for sure. I didn't look at the ending credits. But they give you all this information at the end, right? They give you all this information through the whole episode. The cops did this wrong. They lied about this. Jay lied about that. They didn't get any time served. Jay was appointed an attorney pro bono, probably from the DA. Like all this like bullshit shady stuff, right? It starts making it look like Adnan's innocent.
Right. Like we have all these people building a case against Adnan because there wasn't already one to pursue.
Right. And then we have this situation where Jay says that Jen picked him up on the 13th from his house. And Jen says, no, on the 13th, I picked him up
at a different location. She says like on a street corner somewhere, right?
It was like in a mall.
At a mall. Okay.
So, because right after, and here's what's interesting, right after he gets in the car is when he says, Adnan killed Heyman Lee. And then they go to some dumpster around the corner. And she's like, that happened on the 13th.
Mm-hmm.
So that's her story. So we got a change in Jay's story. We have the police altering all this stuff, right?
Right.
But we have this girl, which is high as a motherfucking kite on the documentary. I think she's on something at least.
I will say this though, Jen seems genuine to me. Like,
right. Okay, so here's the big point,
and that's just a gut feeling.
She says, "Look, I mean, yes. Did the cops lie? Sure. Did the cell phone pings wrong? Did Jay and Adnan not go to this girl's house that night? Who knows, right?" Mm-hmm. She even says, I don't know what to believe anymore.
Right.
But then she reiterates that on the 13th of January, she picks up Jay and he gets in the car and says, Adnan killed Heyman Lee.
Mm-hmm.
Now, his story changes later that he helped bury the body. He didn't tell her that night, but that's what she claims. So after all this stuff and all this smoke that's thrown at you, basically the last impression you get is, well, if Jen is telling the truth, then none of that other stuff matters. Because why would Jay on January 13th, the day Heyman Lee goes missing, why would he tell Jen that Adnan killed her?
There's only two reasons. Right? Either Adnan did it, as he's saying, or Jay did it.
Right.
Or I guess, or they did it together, which is somewhat what the story is anyway. But
right. But so that's pretty freaking damning, though, don't you think? Like, if I'm Robbie and I'm the executive producer, that's not the last taste in your mouth I want to leave on episode 3.
Mm-hmm.
None of that shit really matters, because if Jen is telling the truth, and that's what her statements were to the cops.
Right.
Was, hey, January 13th.
Right. No matter how much the police got Jay to change his story to go along with what they wanted his story to fit the evidence.
Right.
Regardless of that taking place weeks later.
Yeah.
If Jen is being fully honest, if Jen is telling us 100% the truth, that night on the 13th, Jay jumped in her car and says, Adnan killed Heyman Lee. Or Adnan killed Hay,
right?
Then there's very few possibilities that are left.
Right, and that to me is like,
I've always really thought that portion of her story super, super important. Obviously, as you just pointed out, and then the other thing too is the car, Heyman Lee's vehicle. If you believe Jay. If you believe Jay, if you believe that he provided the information regarding the location of her vehicle to the police,
right,
then again, that leads you to only 3 outcomes. Either Adnan killed, Jay killed, or they both did it.
Right.
And that's why it was so important for the police to say to Jay, well, we need you to tell us where her car is. Probably for multiple reasons. One, he's told you multiple stories. Regardless what's going on that we can't see because you didn't videotape it, right. Going on behind the scenes, let's say, as you get to his final story. Regardless of that, they're probably saying, well, we need you to give us something that we don't already know. And if so, one, that could be where the vehicle is. And two, you can't lead us to her body. So the next best thing would be to lead us to her vehicle.
Right, because you can't lead her to the body because the body was found.
And you'll see that a lot of times in these criminal cases, and we've talked about it on many cases that we've covered. Usually when they get a confession, right away they want the killer to lead them to the body, because if for some reason, under any technicality at all, they can get that confession removed from the final trial, then the police can come back and the prosecution can come back and go, yeah, well, we had to throw out your confession because of this, and the other thing. But later that day or first thing the next morning, you led us to the victim's body. So how do you explain that?
Right. So me and Morgan are sitting in the garage thinking, well, yeah, okay, you throw all this stuff at us and it's a bunch of pile of dog shit, and that doesn't seem like the justice system. It's fair. But what do we do about this Jen thing, right? Because like you said, if she's telling the truth, then there's not too many options.
Right.
And Adnan's involved in 2 of the 3. But then that started making me think, there's been discrepancies all along on when the police first talked to Jay.
Yeah.
Now they claim that, the first time they talked to him is when he confessed. Really? Is that how it went down? Is this private investigator that did all this stuff and knew that you made contact with Jay before this? Weeks before this? Weeks before he confesses to the crime? And you're going to tell me that you talked to Jay, you find the body, that you didn't find the car? I mean, we know Jay's a liar, but we also know that the cops are lying and that the DA is lying to just try to win. They're not trying to get to the truth. They're just trying to win, right? That's what we know that. We have evidence of that. So I can dismiss now. I can say, well, Jay is saying that he told the cops where the car was. And if you can just speculate that we think that the cops told Jay where the car was, and it was part of the fabrication. Again, reasonable doubt, you have to go towards innocence, and that kind of dismisses that theory. But we still are left with Jen's conversation. And I'm not saying that Jen is a liar, right? But we have so many people misremembering days that we don't know if she has the date correct on January 13th. I mean, that's what she says. Mm-hmm. But how do we not know that she hung out with Jay after he had a couple talks with police officers, before any interview was reported, and there wasn't some conversation? See what I'm saying? Because everything that she said on the stand, like, she'll even tell you, it's all hearsay because it's all was told to me by somebody else. The only thing that is not hearsay is that she says that she picked up Jay sometime that Jay and Adnan were hanging out from the 13th to whatever it was, the 28th. That whole time period. How many times did Jen pick Jay up with Adnan around or at Jay's house? And why doesn't Jay's story line up with Jen's? She says, picked him up at a mall and Adnan was there. Jay says, nah, she picked me up at my house. Right? And those are not, Jay's not changing his story there because he has to. That's just what he's claiming. So maybe he's misremembering. But what I'm saying is we have a lot of people misremembering, and the fact that their stories don't line up makes me believe that Jen is not 100% sure that when she picked up Jay, the night that she picked up Jay, and Jay said that Adnan killed Hay, that might not have been the 13th of January. And if it wasn't, then to me, when did Jay start fabricating this story? Does that make any sense?
Well, yeah. I mean, the key here is, if Jen is correct, all right, let's go back to that. If she's correct in what she's saying, that she picked him up that night from a mall, as you said.
January 13th, yeah.
January 13th, picked him up from a mall, and he, at some point, once he's in her car, says that Adnan killed Hay.
Yep.
If that is correct, then now we have to go to, well, why would Jay want to alter that story, alter the truth? Why does Jay want everyone to believe that she picked him up from his house and not from the mall?
Right.
And the only thing I can go to would be this. Is there if Jay were involved more so than what he has said, or if he committed the crime by himself, is there a chance that Jay was scared that somehow, some way they could trace Hay's car, Hay's vehicle to that shopping mall,
right,
where Jen says that she picked him up?
Right.
And if you could do that, then that might point to a completely different killer. And so you have to question, if you believe that Jen's telling us the truth, then why does Jay want to alter that portion of the story that seems to be kind of pointless on the outside looking in? It's
right.
Not so obvious that it's just this one little detail that he can change and tweak, but he might be the only one that knows the strength and the power of that actual detail.
Right, but if you have this guy's cell phone and you go, he lent his car out to his friend Jay, which is 19, and he's a dummy, and we busted him on marijuana. But hey, you're friends with the ex-boyfriend and a suspect in this girl's case. And if they talk to him and they kind of lay it out on the table like they did with all these other eyewitnesses that really were really informatives, right? These girls that they threatened if they didn't press charges or they didn't testify that they'd go to jail for whatever. Did the cops then talk to him, and then did he get picked up from Jen? And that's when he said, oh my God, Adnan killed Hay. See what I'm saying?
No, yeah, I get it.
Because then it's not he's telling the truth. He knows that the cops are going to make him say this. So now he says it to a friend. And I just question whether or not Jen knows it was actually January 13th or not. Because like I said, the whole documentary, just to sum this up real quickly.
Necessarily, though, she doesn't have to know for certain that it was the night of the 13th. It could just be as simple as knowing that it was before Jay ever spoke to the police.
Right.
Because he didn't speak with the police the 13th, the 14th, the 15th, right? I mean, there was some delay in that.
Right. We don't really know when we have
we have different people saying different things regarding the first time he spoke to police.
Right, but it was like in February what, 26 or something when they
when
they first
I thought I saw one that said maybe February 22nd, something like that.
Right, but what I'm saying is, so we're talking about a whole month difference. But again, you have a girl going missing for 3 weeks with all this time elapsing because what I'm saying is there's more time elapsing because of the snow days. And when you add in snow days and the power outages and stuff like that, you start losing communication of certain days. So it's almost like feels a little longer. So I just, to me, it was a lot of these bombshells of, wow, this is not the justice system. Wow, they got these people to lie. I don't think, maybe they didn't even, get the star witness, or the technical witness to lie. He just was misinformed. But they lied to Jay to fit their narrative. Jay then had to lie on tape. Then he had to lie on the stand. And this is just... Then you get a guy, again, like I said, how is somebody else involved in this crime, Jay being involved in the crime, and not getting charged with anything? But you have Adnan being charged with life plus 30. But anyways.
But that was the trade-off. That happens all the time.
Yeah, no, I understand that. But to me, the whole episode was like moving forward. It was like, maybe not bombshells, but like, Jesus Christ. I mean, it really made me realize how shifty the cops could be, especially with these confessions, and the fact that they had to change the confessions later. I mean, that's just so shifty. And then, like I said, all of a sudden, after all the smoke clears, Jen is like, hey, does not change what happened when Jay got out of my car January 13th. And I remember thinking, damn, that's the last thing I remember. Like, to me, it was like, if that's true, damn. But then, like I said, a couple minutes later, I thought, what if she's just wrong on the time? So but people keep trying to bait me into arguments on Twitter and Instagram. But it hasn't worked yet. But I think that's because I was never 100% sold that he was innocent or 100% sold that he was guilty. I was just really open to the idea of the discussion. In this case, because of shows like Serial, because there was a bunch of documentaries, because there was a show called like Serial Dynasty, because there was another show called Undisclosed, and they dove into every point. This case, so many people know so much information about it. So to me, it was always an interesting case to talk to true crime fans or true crime nerds, because there were so many details and you can kind of go through every little piece. But I was never sold either way. At moments I'd lean more one way, and then at other moments lean another way. Mm-hmm. And you would think by the third part that I have a little bit more clarity. And I was getting there. It was like, we're getting to the end of the episode 3, and I'm getting some clarity. I'm gonna be on one side of the fence, and my fist is going to be up, and I'm going to be doing everything I can to champion that idea. And then, like I said, this little slip, is Jen correct or not? So I feel like I'm more confused than ever. You know what I mean? But definitely, I think when you hear me getting upset, I know that there was injustice done. I don't know if he's guilty or not, right? I don't know 100% if he's guilty or not, but because of the fabrication of the stories, because of the tampering with the data and not the correct data, and the not the correct defense, he deserves a fair trial. And that's hard to say, especially if you don't know if somebody's 100% innocent or not. Because obviously, if
even the guilty deserve a fair trial.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. Like, you're never going to be like, well, we know this. Well, we know this SOB did it, the problem, give him a fair trial. Yeah,
but the problem here is we're talking about somebody that's already in prison. That's the problem with it. It's okay. When you say even the guilty deserve a fair trial, that's 100% true. What's not true is even the guilty deserve another trial.
Yeah, it's just so frustrating. I don't know. Like I said, I think part of it is just that I feel like we're better than this, or we should be better than this. And I know that...
Don't lump me into this. Leave me out of this.
Well, I know that Well, what I mean by that is just the system in general. I mean, I know.
Well, this is not supposed to be how the system works out. This is individuals. If this goes down the way that they are presenting it to have likely have gone down, if this did go down the way that it seems like it may have gone down, this is individuals manipulating the system. This is individuals that are they're doing what they want to do. You can't, if you sit across the table from somebody and you're playing Monopoly with 7 people and one of them cheats, you can't blame it on Monopoly. You blame it on the individual that decided to steal a bunch of the fake money out of the box when you weren't looking.
Right. Yeah. Good point. All right.
The system's not perfect, but it's intended to be fair. And unfortunately, there are those that take advantage of the system.
Yeah. Well said. So, we got to get out of here because we got to head to the airport to pick up 2 special guests. So, we'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, we'll determine how special these guests are after their visit.
Yeah, they're special smelly guests. And remember, ban the van.